Hey guys, it's Mel. Welcome to my channel. So today's video is going to be something a bit different from what I normally do on this channel, because today I want to talk to you about the TV show The Good Place. So, as you can tell from the title and from the thumbnail of this video, I think that The Good Place is one of the most amazing TV shows that I have ever seen and possibly has ever been made. So I want to share with you why I think that. So the first thing that I want to talk to you about is the diversity of both the cast and the characters. First up, the 6 main characters. Main characters are made up of half white actors and characters and half non-white actors and characters. Our 2 heavy hitters are Kristen Bell and Ted Danson. Kristen Bell plays the role of Eleanor Shellstrop. She is probably most famous for her role as Veronica Mars in Veronica Mars, and she also plays Anna in Frozen and Frozen 2. Personally, I think she's fantastic and hilarious and an amazing human being. Then we have Ted Danson, who is probably the most well-known here in Australia for his role in the 80s sitcom Cheers, but I do believe he's had a number of roles in television and movies, and he plays the role of Michael. Next up in our 3 white main characters and actors is newcomer D'Arcy Carden. D'Arcy plays the role of Janet in The Good Place. Janet is a fantastic character, I think really well done, and D'Arcy is amazing. I think she pulls that off incredibly well. Then we have our 3 non-white actors and non-white characters. So we have William Jackson Harper, who is an American-born black actor who plays the role of Chidi Anagonye, who, I just have to double check. He was born in Nigeria but raised in Senegal. Then we have Jameela Jamil, who is a British actor who has Pakistani and Indian heritage. She plays the role of Tahani Al-Jamil in The Good Place. She is also a newcomer. I believe this was actually her first acting role ever. She is incredible. She does such a fantastic job. I'm just super excited to see her in other things. And lastly, we have Manny Jacinta, who is a Filipino-Canadian actor who plays the role of Jason Mendoza, who is also a Filipino, although Filipino-American person from Florida. Those are the 6 main actors and the characters that they play. Before I go any further, I just realised that I probably should say that if you have not watched this TV show or have not got beyond the first season, if you're not concerned about spoilers, feel free to keep watching, obviously, but if you are concerned about spoilers, then perhaps don't watch from here on. As much as I would love you to, I am not necessarily going to be particularly careful about what spoilers I may tell you. I'm not going to go out of my way to be spoilery, but at the same time I'm not going to go out of my way to not be spoilery, so just consider yourself warned. Alright, so those are the 6 main actors and main characters. The rest of the cast is just as diverse. So we have other white characters, we have other black characters, we have other characters with Asian descent, we have other characters who are Latinx, we have other characters who have Indian heritage and Pakistani heritage, we have characters from all over the globe with all sorts of backgrounds and history. And I think that's amazing that a TV show is so diverse. One of the things that I find really amazing about the diversity in this show is that it is not put forward in the TV show itself as something that it should be lauded for. It is put forward in the TV show as something that is completely normal, that in The Good Place, or heaven, you would obviously have a variety of people from all walks of life, from all backgrounds, with all sorts of history and heritage, and it's just normal. No one makes boo about it, and I just think that that is really great. So given that I just said that it wasn't intended to be lauded for that, and here I am lauding it for that, I still think that that's a really amazing thing about The Good Place. And that brings me to my second reason why I think The Good Place is an absolutely amazing show that everyone should watch, and that is the subversion of expectations around that diversity. So not just is it just a normal thing that there be people from diverse backgrounds and cultures and heritage, but we see a lot of the expectations of what you would think those characters would be like completely subverted and thrown on their head. So the example in the 6 main characters are Eleanor. You would expect that potentially if there was going to be a socialite, rich and famous, it would be the blonde, petite American, but no. She is an Arizona trash bag, as she herself says in a number of different situations, a number of different times throughout the series. And not just because her favourite book is Jenna... I have to look that up too, because I don't actually know who this person is, which I'm not sure what that says about me, but we'll ignore that. Kendall Jenner's Instagram feed. So, not just because she says that that is her favourite book, but because she basically lived her life being incredibly selfish, self-centered, uncaring, and just not very nice as a human being. Then we have Chidi as the main black guy. We've come to expect that he's probably going to be pretty buff. If he's smart, it's street smart. He's not necessarily going to be bookish smart. He is probably going to be all about action. Chidi is none of those things. Chidi is a moral philosophy professor who is very awkward, very nervous, incapable of making a decision, and just generally kind of a nerd. So another definite subversion. Then we come to Tahani. Tahani is the socialite, rich, famous, which again you wouldn't necessarily expect. You would expect Tahani to be a hard-working, potentially single mum, but instead she is again quite the opposite. She is in no way hardworking. She is a socialite who has gotten by attempting to do the right thing and look after people by having all sorts of charity auctions and things like that that very rich people often seem to do. I don't know how true it is, but in movies certainly, as a way of trying to help the poor, but she does it for completely the wrong reasons. She does it so that people will like her rather than because she actually cares. So there's Tahani. And then we have Jason. Jason is the Asian character, and as the Asian character, again, you would expect a certain role. You would expect him to be very book smart, to be the awkward, maybe sort of cute, but awkward nerd. He is not. He is a total airhead. He has no idea what's going on, but he has a heart of gold. He's a really lovely character. There's our 6 main characters, and there's some subversion right there. I just think that's really, really clever. I really, really appreciate that. Not only have they cast very diversely, they have shown up a lot of the expectations and a lot of the token characteristics that we see in TV shows and movies with diverse characters and diverse casting. Continuing on with that, I've put this in as part of my second reason, but maybe it's just a bonus fact. Every single woman in this TV show is a badass. From Janet, who repeatedly tells people that she's not a girl and always owns her, well, whatever she is. We don't really ever know exactly what Janet is, but she's not a girl and she's not a robot. To Eleanor, who is a total trash bag, but is very, very strong in her convictions, and when she decides that she wants to be a better person, she goes for it. I mean, of course she has hurdles and she makes mistakes and she fumbles, but she goes for it and she sticks to it and she does learn. But, and one of the things that I also love about the way that they've done that on this show, she doesn't become a totally different person. She's still a trash bag. She still loves reading Instagram feeds. She still loves shrimp. She doesn't become a softer, kinder, sweeter woman who wants to have babies and fawn over cute things. She's still, in essence, herself. She still has all of the things that made her a kick-ass badass, but she's just a nicer person who thinks about other people and is not as selfish. And I love that. Then we have Tahani, who is beautiful, absolutely stunning, and very much aware of that, but still is a person in her own right and still has foibles and still has things that she worries about and is upset about, and she's still trying to make her way in the world. So she is the airheaded socialite, but she's still her own person. She's still very, very rounded. All of the characters in this show are very rounded. They all have flaws, they all have personalities, they all have good points. Even when we're learning that they're not actually that great at all, they still have good points, and they still care about each other, and they still go out of the way to be decent to each other and to look after each other. Even the total trash bags. But like I said with Eleanor, they don't necessarily change who they are in essence. Chidi is still incredibly nervous and gets stomach aches all the time, even by the end of the show and everything he's gone through. Tahani still name drops all over the place despite all the learning and growth that she goes through. Jason still has no idea what is going on by the end of the show, but despite everything that he goes through. And Janet and Michael, the super beings, angels and whatever Janet is, they have real character growth. They have real characterization. They have real humanity, and it's just amazing, especially for the character of Janet. And like I said before, Darcy Carden is incredible. She plays the role of not a girl, not a robot, some kind of personification of Siri, all the depository of all knowledge in the entire universe, who is being presented to the residents of the neighborhood as a regular human woman who can get all this stuff for you, who knows everything about you. She learns throughout the series. She learns. She becomes more than the sum of her parts, more of those things put together, but she's still ultimately herself, and she still repeats, even to the last episode, that she's not a girl and not a robot, which, as you can tell if you haven't watched the series, is pretty much one of her catchphrases. Number 3, we're talking more about subversion. At this time, it subverts the expectations of what a sitcom is. So, the setup of the show, the lighting of the show, the setting of the show, the dressing of the sets, all of that sort of thing is that typical saccharine, everything is nice and pretty, everyone has nice pretty stuff, aren't we all lovely kind of sitcoms. But the subversion comes with the characters themselves. Think about something like Friends. Don't get me wrong, I do like Friends, but we're constantly told on Friends, by all of the friends, how lovely Ross is, and he's the nicest guy, and he's so amazing. But he doesn't behave like a nice guy. He spends the entire 10 seasons being an asshole. He doesn't learn, he doesn't grow, he doesn't ever admit that he's wrong or has made a mistake, and yet we're constantly told how nice he is. So one of the subversions of this TV show, of the sitcom thing that I've already talked about, is the fact that all of the characters actually do grow. We don't have to suspend disbelief about their niceness or lack thereof, because we see their growth. We see that Eleanor is actually a trash bag and kind of selfish and doesn't really care that much about people, except that even from the first episode, when she's desperately trying to hide and pretend that she should be there, everything is normal and nothing's bad is going on, and she doesn't really care that much about Chidi, and she certainly doesn't try to take anything in about him at all, which they show you in that episode. They spend some time talking about. Even in that episode, even when she's being selfish and self-righteous and horrible, you can still tell that actually she's kind of okay. She's actually got some redeeming points, which later will come out, and she will learn and she will grow and she'll become a better person. And all of them become better people. All of them start out as kind of dodgy people. Even the two characters, Chidi and Tahani, who you think are supposed to be in the good place, you become aware that maybe they're not really, and maybe they're actually kind of awful, but you can see their redeeming features. You can see that they genuinely believe that they are good people. We don't spend 10 entire seasons being told how amazing this character is, but seeing absolutely no character growth whatsoever. Please don't come for me. You actually see character growth, even from episode 1 of season 1, and certainly all the way through to the end of season 4, which is just beautiful. So it turns that aspect of sitcoms on its head. But the main reason is that essentially the TV show is a moral philosophy course, which is not something you would ever expect to see on television, and certainly not in the form of a sitcom. So when Eleanor figures out that she shouldn't really be there and that she is in fact not the Eleanor they all seem to think she is, she goes to Chidi, who she's been told is her soulmate, and she asks him to help her become a better person. And because Chidi was a moral philosophy professor when he was on Earth and alive, he agrees after some talking into it. Basically, they start these ethics classes, and so all throughout the first season, but even on into the other seasons, we are talking about moral philosophy. We have episodes that deal specifically with certain aspects of different moral philosophies and different moral philosophers. We talk about such moral philosophers as Immanuel Kant and his categorical imperative philosophy of life, which is the idea that we must all act according to an unwavering moral code without any regard for circumstances, which personally I don't think really works, but that's what that is. We look at moral variables. We look at moral relativism, we look at contractualism and effective altruism. There's an entire episode about the trolley problem, and for those who don't know what the trolley problem is, then I recommend you go and watch The Good Place, first and foremost. But basically the trolley problem is a problem that is taught to moral philosophy students, whereby you are going along in some kind of train or trolley or cable car, and you come to a fork in the train tracks, and on one train track are like 5 people, and on the other train track is 1 person. What do? You can only swerve and decide to hit all 5 or just 1. So the point of the trolley problem is that the decision on the face of it looks pretty easy. You obviously hit 1 person instead of killing 5. But what if the 5 people are all Nazis and responsible for the death of thousands of people in the gas chambers in World War II? What if the 1 person is about to go and do a bank robbery? Or what if you know one of the people? So there's all sorts of variables in the trolley problem that show you how it's not quite that easy, it's not quite that obvious, that there are lots of different aspects that need to be considered. So all throughout the whole entire series, we are learning about moral philosophy, and even to the point where they have managed to turn "that's why everyone hates moral philosophy professors" into a television catchphrase, which, I don't know about you, but I've never really given that much thought to moral philosophy professors at all, let alone whether I hate or love them. So the idea that there's all these people watching television and hearing constantly this catchphrase of how that's why we all hate moral philosophy professors is kind of hilarious, really. To me, anyway. That's probably my favourite thing about this TV show, and I can't believe that Michael Schur got away with that. But he did write Brooklyn Nine-Nine and Parks and Recreation and The American Office. He's a heavyweight at this point, so I guess that's what happens when you give a heavyweight a whole bunch of money and a whole bunch of resources and tell them to go and write a TV show. But it's doing pretty well, so I guess he was onto something. Anyway, number 4, the point system. So the whole entire premise of The Good Place and The Bad Place in the TV show The Good Place is that throughout your life you earn and lose points according to all the various different actions that you do. And there are actually websites where you can go and have a look at all the different actions that will gain and lose your points and how much the points are and everything. I did have a very quick look on that because I wanted to see some of the things that were quite funny in the point system, but I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail there. It has things like boorish behaviour at the opera loses you a bunch of points. Going for the New York Yankees, I think, loses you points. I think. Just funny things like that, which, you know, is always amusing. One of my favourites is telling a woman to smile loses you points. Quite a few, actually. So that's pretty cool. And again, showing you some nice little bit of feminism there. But yeah, so basically when you die, all of your points are calculated and you have to get over a certain number to go to the good place. The first season is the 4 characters who are in the good place. First up, you learn that Eleanor is an imposter, so they're telling her all about how she did all this amazing stuff, but she didn't do any of it, so she assumes that she died at the same time as another Eleanor, and she's accidentally there in the good place instead, and she doesn't want to go to the bad place, as you'd imagine. So she's trying to figure out what to do about that. And then we have Chidi and Tahani, who, as you learn throughout the first season, are kind of awful for a variety of different reasons, but they think they should be there. They think they've done the right things and the good things throughout their whole lives, so it takes them quite a bit of time in season 1 learning what they did wrong. In fact, you don't really learn that until the very end. And then we have Jason, who is first off introduced as Janyu, a Tibetan Buddhist monk who has had a vow of silence most of his life, and Michael, who is the architect of this neighbourhood, the Good Place neighbourhood, has offered Jason, or Janyu, that he can continue being silent. So you don't learn for quite a while into that first season that Jason is also not Janyu. So Jason and Eleanor are both not who we think they are, but the other two are who they think they are. But then at the end of the first season, you discover, as they discover, that they are not in fact in the good place. They are actually in the bad place. And that this is a new form of torture that Michael is trying, whereby he puts people into a fake good place neighbourhood and basically lets them torture each other. But they figure it out, and so begins the overarching story of the rest of the seasons. Anyway, so all of that is to say that the point system is how you get into either the good place or the bad place. Throughout the seasons, the rest of the seasons, we start to learn that maybe the system itself is flawed, maybe the points is flawed, and so they start looking into what's going on and how they can potentially help themselves, first of all, to get into good place, but then later on all of humanity to get into the good place. And they figure out that humanity is, they figure out that the point system is flawed. The point system doesn't work anymore because it's really, really old, and it's based on a point system that worked back in the Stone Age, but doesn't work anymore because life is incredibly complicated, because capitalism and globalization has basically meant that every decision that you make is going to have a negative effect somewhere along the line, no matter how good of a person you are, no matter how much you try to be a good person. It gives this example in season 3 where Michael and Tahani are having a conversation, and Michael then realizes this fact, and he looks up an example of a person in the 1400s, say, gives his grandmother a bunch of flowers and he earns 15,000 points. A person in 2019 gives his grandmother a bunch of flowers and he earns negative 200 points. So Michael was like, well, why would that happen? And it's because of all of the ramifications of the flowers. So back in 1400s, a person go and pick the flowers, done. Whereas now you go to a florist and you order the flowers. So how are the workers treated? Where did the flowers come from? How much of a carbon footprint is being made by the flowers getting to the florist? How are the workers that pick the flowers treated? How are the flowers grown? Do they use lots of pesticides? So a nice act is no longer just a nice act. It now has a whole bunch of other moral questions attached to it that aren't being considered by the system, and that it's incredibly complicated to be a decent person in today's world, and that pretty much nothing that you do these days is free of some kind of negative impact somewhere along the line. And so according to this point system, you're always doomed to fail. I just think this is a really interesting commentary on the world in which we live, on globalization and capitalism, and again, the fact that it's in a sitcom which is supposed to just be 20 minutes of funny is just amazing. I just think it's just incredible. Blows me away. My last point is basically about the production value of the show and the writing of the show, and I think it's amazing. I think it's really, really well done. It's really well shot. Every little aspect of the set design and the set dressing is really thought about and placed in such a way as to be a comment in and of itself, and for the show. So for the example is in the second season where they constantly have to reinvent the neighborhood, and the first season the neighborhood was full of frozen yogurt restaurants, and then you find out much later why that is, and that's because Michael says to Janet, what is something that everyone thinks they love but actually they kind of hate? And she says frozen yogurt. Now in season 2 they are constantly reinventing the neighborhood, and they're constantly putting in these restaurants and these different places in the neighborhood that are kind of along those same lines. So they have like a chowder fountain at one point, which is disgusting. I mean, whether you like chowder or not, which I'm a vegetarian, so ew. I'm also Australian, and chowder just isn't really a thing in Australia, so not something I'm experienced with as well. A chowder fountain? I just can't comprehend that being something that is actually nice. So it's the same concept. So in every single version of the neighborhood they have something like that, and they have signs that reference that, and they have just little bits that just do so much to prop up the whole storyline. Another really amazing example is when they're all in Janet's void. So Janet, being basically a repository of all human knowledge, all knowledge of the universe, doesn't live in the same place as you and I would live. She lives in a void, which is basically just nothing. There's nothing in the void. And when they all go to the void, there is nothing. It's nothing. But then they start to populate it, and they start to be able to call up the things. And it's really interesting, the stuff that they individually choose to call up. And even the clothing that they put on themselves when they're in Janet's void, they're all Janet, which again, Darcy does amazingly. And the things that they all call up into existence is so specific to each of their characters, and the clothing that they wear is so specific to each of their characters. It's beautiful. It's so well done. And yeah, the set design, the costume design, and the dialogue is amazing, and the acting is amazing. The actors are so brilliant. They just deliver their lines perfectly. They embody their characters perfectly. I love it. Mwah. It's amazing. So those were my 5 reasons why The Good Place is one of the best TV shows around, and why you should all be watching The Good Place. But to be fair, and I hate to end on a bad note, but to be fair, as you would imagine, we're not all perfect, and neither is The Good Place. One of the main examples that I feel that I need to mention is that there really is no queer LGBTQA+ representation. All of the main characters, except for Michael, and many of the minor characters are paired off into relationships. There's really only one example of a queer relationship, and that is pretty much used mostly as something funny. So not great representation there. They should have put in better representation there. No, I'm not trying to give a but, let's all ignore that. But, I do have a but. Given all of the other really great things about the show, I still think that it is one of the best shows around, and yes, it could have been improved upon in that way. There's also no real representation of anybody with disabilities. So again, that is an area that very much could have been built upon and improved upon. However, I still think that it's an amazing thing, and I highly recommend that everyone goes and watches it. If you have watched it and you loved it as much as I did, please comment below and let me know. Equally, if you have watched it and did not love it, please comment below and let me know. I'd love to know that too. If you have anything at all about The Good Place, or anything else really for that matter that you'd like to talk to me about, please do comment below. And thank you all so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed my video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to get more content from me, and I will see you next time.